Salute BookTube, welcome to my channel. Thank you for being here. This is the part 2 of my starter library video. This is a video influenced by my good friend Mike at Bibliophiles Bookscape, who made this video just basically saying pick 10 to 20 books as a starter video for your library. I'm making it a bit special. I'm focusing on books about Iraqi history. Um, and why I'm doing that is because when I was younger, getting into reading, I had a sort of philosophy for buying books. I had this dream that I would write a sweeping multi-volume history of Iraq, Mesopotamia, from the beginning of history, and Iraq and Mesopotamia is the beginning of history, all the way to the present. Just a massive sweeping history, which such a book I don't think does exist, and I don't think it exists because it's probably impossible to write. The history is so vast and so many characters, it would take a crazy person to write it. I mean, it might exist, it might be a joint sort of editorial kind of thing, but one author writing the whole thing, I haven't seen it. If you have seen something like it, please do let me know. Um, but I thought, when I was younger and much more idealistic, I thought, yeah, maybe I'll write that book. And to do that, you need research materials, and that means either going to the library and getting books or buying books. And that's what initially, early on, when I was developing this big library, vast library you're seeing behind me, initially those were the books I was looking for. I said I would buy books about Iraq and build my library from there. However, what becomes very obvious, very clear when anybody is um, reading or studying about Iraq is it's not one self-contained island. Iraq is in the middle of the Middle East, and it's really the crossroads of civilizations. Every civilization has invaded, conquered Iraq or Mesopotamia. So therefore, to understand Iraqi history, you really do need to understand global history, because you can watch part one. I'll link part one to the video. I'll link Mike's original video as well. Um, as you'll quickly discover, and if you do look at my part one, a whole host of personalities came sweeping through Iraq. Um, of course, there's the original ancients, the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, and the Assyrians. But then Iraq was, for the rest of its history, invaded from outsiders, whether it's the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Byzantines. And then, as we'll get into this part two, the Arabs, the Muslim Arabs from the deserts of Arabia came sweeping through Iraq and Islamicized the country. And that's the topic of this one. Part one dealt with the ancients. This one will deal with Islam and the Middle Ages, or the Golden Age of Baghdad. And then part three will do more modern Iraq in another video. So yeah, I mean, just to recap, it's always been invaded, and because of that, if you want to read about Iraq, your library is quickly going to expand, because it's not one narrow little field. It's a very vast, very broad field, and to understand it, you've got to understand the world around it. And so, I mean, again, my library is really divided into that way. You can see this big bookshelves. There's two rows there that are ancient history, mostly ancient Near East, but also Roman and Greek. There are what I call my Middle Ages book. And those are about the Gulf. For those of you who don't know, I'm based in the United Arab Emirates. And those books are about the United Arab Emirates. But I'm half Iraqi, so I've always been fascinated by Iraq. And then, so those, and the Gulf and Iraq, they're very close to each other, although culturally very different. And then those shelves over there are modern Middle East, and with a heavy emphasis on Iraq, all those rows there. So as you can see, there's a lot of books, and they're double stacked. So again, when discussing Iraq, it's not really one sort of isolated case. It's a much broader subject. Just to recap from number one, we discussed the ancient antiquity, Mesopotamia, those great civilizations that invented writing and law and cities and a whole bunch of firsts. What was developed in Iraq, calendars, all that kind of stuff. Agriculture, let's not forget agriculture. Um, but we went through that whole sweep, and then we discussed later on the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Byzantines, and that's where we ended the last video. There was a war between the Byzantines, which were really an extension of Rome, Rome in the east, and the Persian Sassanid Empire, and they were fighting each other on and off for 100 years, and most of the battlefields are in Iraq. Iraq, again, is always conquered, and very easily conquered. Easily conquered, but not easy to control. And as we can see in the early 21st century, that's the same lessons the Americans failed to understand. They were very quickly entered Baghdad, took them 2 weeks, 3 weeks to enter Baghdad, remove the Saddam Hussein regime, enact regime change. But then when the occupation began, that's when they started facing troubles. And they're not the first, and if history is any indication, they won't be the last. So those Byzantines and Sassanids fought each other and really fought themselves to a stalemate. 100 years, they completely exhausted their people, they exhausted their treasuries, a lot of bloodshed, and the status quo really remained the same as when the war began. But because those two grand empires were completely exhausted, there was a third direction that attacked Iraq that nobody previously in history had considered, and those were the Arabs, under the leadership of the Prophet Muhammad, who came with a special message, Islam, and the Quran, the holy book of Muslims to this day. They came in from Mecca and Medina and Arabia and swept through Iraq, and then swept east all the way to China and west all the way to Spain. And that's where the end of antiquity is, and the beginning of the Middle Ages, which was a medieval period in Europe, in Western Europe, but was a golden age in the Islamic view of history. So that's where we are now, and I think with that introduction, again, better to watch the part one, and then you can better understand this part two. So with that, we can begin again with the Islamic conquest of Iraq. Where do we begin with books? Of course, the best place to start is you've got to understand the Prophet and the coming of Islam. It's impossible. It didn't happen in Iraq. It happened in Mecca, which is in today's Saudi Arabia, which is quite close to Iraq, but as I mentioned, culturally very different. But you do really need to understand its rise before you can, you do need to understand its rise to understand its influence on Iraq. I guess the best place to start is probably a book like this. This is by Hugh Kennedy. It's The Great Arab Conquests. How the Spread of Islam Changed the World We Live In, is the title of this book. There's a lot of books about the coming of Islam and the great conquests of the Arab Muslims. This is just one I have in my library, and I thought I'd show. Again, I mentioned this in the first video. Don't take these books that I'm showing here as recommendations. This is just giving you an outline. You can probably pick your own and see which area you enjoy, and then pick a book that perhaps gets good ratings on Goodreads or Amazon or something, or that's well reviewed, or that you've heard of. But this is one I have just as an example, because once the Muslims established themselves in Arabia, they spread north in conquest. You can see from the picture just vast militaries, and again, knocking out the Persian Sassanid Empire, knocking out the Byzantine Empire, because they had exhausted themselves in their wars between themselves. And these guys came in as a black swan. Nobody expected anything from that quarter, from the south. So there's that. It's also important to understand the Islamic history, because yes, Islam came out of Mecca and Arabia, what is now Saudi Arabia, very quickly. Once the Islamic empire grew, the power shifted, and the center of gravity shifted to Iraq. There was a time where the Arabs settled an empire in Damascus in Syria, but then very quickly the Abbasid Empire was developed in Baghdad and centered in Baghdad, with its capital in Baghdad, and the golden age of Baghdad, and Harun al-Rashid and the 1001 Nights and all of that good stuff. That's this period. But the other thing you have to understand is Islam, right after the death of the Prophet, quickly fragmented into two parties, the Sunni and the Shia. And that's important in Iraq. It makes Iraqi history very complex, but like the Protestants and the Catholics, I guess, the Sunni and Shia, there are Sunni and Shia in Iraq, and it's about 60% to 40%. So it's very important to sort of understand that difference and how it plays a role in the future history of Iraq. This is a book I've shown previously. It's probably the best book I've read on the subject. This one I can recommend. It's by Barnaby Rogerson, and it's called The Heirs of the Prophet Muhammad. And the subtitle is And the Roots of the Sunni Shia Schism. Very good book to understand Sunni Shiism in the context of history, because Shiaism, Shia teaching, developed in Iraq. There were four successors to the Prophet. The fourth one, Ali, moved his base of operations to Iraq. He was killed there. His son Hussein took over the mantle. He was martyred there, and that's where the whole legend and Shia beliefs really come from. He was killed in a small town south of Baghdad called Karbala in the American media. So important to understand that, to get that background. But once the Sunni Shia schism is sort of resolved, I guess, and the Muslims consolidate their conquests from China to Spain, with Baghdad at its center and Baghdad as its capital, they do settle down. They create and develop a civilization that is the golden age of Baghdad, as I mentioned, the 1001 Nights and all of that stuff. Here's a book. It's by Benson Bobrick about that period. This is called The Caliph's Splendor. Very nice cover there. The subtitle is Islam and the West in the Golden Age of Baghdad. So this, again, I don't know how much of it is based in Baghdad, but it gives you an idea. And there's thousands of books about the Abbasid Baghdad Golden Age. You can choose your own, but you just need to understand that this was a seminal part of Iraqi history. Iraq's history is so long; it's got two sort of cycles of greatness. There's the antiquity with the great ancient civilizations, and then it came back again in the Middle Ages with the rise of Baghdad. Few countries have it, maybe Italy with the Romans, and then the Renaissance, but similar idea there. And the caliphs in Baghdad last for a good. The end gets a bit complicated, but a good 400 or 500 years. So we're talking about the year 700 to the year 1250. But then eventually the empire breaks up, and when the empire breaks up, Iraq goes through a steep decline. And really, some argue it hasn't recovered from that decline. The main reason for that decline was foreign pressure. There were two forces pressuring Iraq, again, from outside. The first was the Crusades. Now, the Crusades, again, is a huge subject, thousands upon thousands of books. Uh, the I can show books about the Crusades, but I think what here I'm gonna show this book again. I can't recommend it. I just want to show this book because it's got a cool cover. I don't own this copy. I should. I only like it because of the cover. This is by John Mann, and it's Saladin. Sorry about the glare. Saladin, Salah ad-Din in Arabic, Anglicanized as Saladin, Westernized as Saladin. The subtitle, The Life of Legend and the Islamic Empire. He was originally from Iraq, although most of he gained fame by reconquering Jerusalem for Islam, and he had his power base in Egypt, but he was originally from Iraq, and the Crusades affected the entire Middle East, Iraq included. The other force that was invading Iraq at this time and severely hampered the Arab Abbasid Islamic Empire came from the east, and those were the Mongols. This, I guess the word is barbaric. Just they had a scorched earth policy. They just killed and pillaged their way halfway across the world, including Baghdad. The most famous pillaging they ever did was the city of Baghdad in the year 1258, I believe is the date, and it's famous. They say from the amount of killing that the Mongols did, the river Tigris that runs through Baghdad turned red from the amount of blood and the amount of killing that they did, slaughter that they did. For that period, the sort of Crusades and the Mongol invasion of Iraq and the fall of Baghdad. This book, again, I can recommend this book. It's by Justin Marozzi, and it's called Baghdad, City of Peace, City of Blood. And like I said in part one, Iraq is a very blessed country, but it's also a very cursed country. It's extremely wealthy, it's extremely rich, but because of geography and just the nature of the lands around it, it's also a very bloody place. So this is an excellent book. It goes through more than just the Crusades and the Mongols. It goes into modern Baghdad, but a good book about the history of Baghdad, really from the Golden Age to today, but focusing more on that Golden Age, sort of Crusades, Mongol period, Middle Ages Baghdad, really. Yeah, so that's what I would choose for at least this is what's available in my library. Again, the Mongols and the sack of Baghdad and the Crusades. There's a endless library which you can pursue to scratch your interest or to quench your thirst for learning about Iraq and Iraqi history, if you are so inclined. And then, I think that the fall of Baghdad in 1258, we can call the end of the Middle Ages. That period, that the fall of the Golden Age of Baghdad, I think is a good place to stop. And then we'll do part 3, which is the modern, which is the last, give or take 800 years, pretty much. We'll do that in part 3, as we'll see, again, another external empire takes control of Iraq and lasts for a very, very long time, for the majority of that modern period. And then we'll get into the World War I and the 20th century and up to the present. But until then, BookTube, I will wrap this one up. I thank you for watching this. Check out Mike's channel again, his version of this. But until then, BookTube, until part 3, salute.